Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Great Awakenings. I'm Scott Bennett, your host, and we have once again the great Scott Ritter, a formidable intellect and analyst and a former Marine officer, as well as a UN weapons inspector. Scott is one of the preeminent voices and minds when we are looking at what is happening all across the globe, but with particular emphasis on Ukraine, on China, and I think Ukraine is a particularly sensitive issue these days. So I'm so honored to have Scott Ritter on with us today. We're going to jump into the analytics of this. And one of the reasons I really enjoy when Scott has some time to spend is he is one of the few people that has the critical ability to analyze, to think, to separate the propaganda, the emotionalism, and really get down to the nuts and bolts of the battlefield and the psychological warrior space and what's going on in the minds of the Ukrainians, the Russians, the Europeans, the Americans. So we're going to jump into that with Scott Ritter. And Scott, it is an honor to have you on with us once again. I'm just going to let you fire away. What is the most pressing thing? If we start with Ukraine, I think that's a key issue. Let me preface it with this. Just this morning, here are the new intel developments that we're getting. The Ukrainians are shelling a dam to try and flood the civilian populations of Donetsk and stuff. They've been shelling the nuclear facility, which you wrote a wonderful piece in RT.com on, and how this is really a potential Chernobyl, if not worse, nuclear disaster. It is nuclear terrorism when the Ukrainians are engaged in this attempt to blow up a nuclear facility, for God's sake. And, that seems to be a pivot point because the Russians have now assembled the United Nations Security Council, which has elevated this. And I think, as you've wisely put, all of the evidence, all of the analytics of the trajectory of the weapon systems and such points very clearly to Ukraine. And when you say Ukraine, of course, you're by proxy saying the United States as well, and the British and others. So I'll hand it to you, Scott. What is the most important intel that you can brief us on right now? What's going on? Go ahead, sir.
Well, if I were to use one word, it would be desperation. And I would use that to describe the actions of Ukraine and the mindset of Ukraine. They are absolutely desperate right now. The end is not just, it's no longer over the horizon. The end is staring them right in the face. The Russians are on the verge of breaking through the final major defensive barrier that had been set up by Ukraine in Donetsk Oblast, or now the newly independent state of Donetsk People's Republic. And once this happens, the Ukrainians will be slaughtered. It'll be a rout. I mean, it's already a rout. They're already being slaughtered, but they're able to delay the pace of the Russian advance because they've had 8 years to dig in these very extensive fortifications. Once Russia breaks through and rolls up these defenses, then they enter a kind of warfare that Russia will have more advantages than it currently has. I mean, right now, the way the war is, the best way I can describe what's going on in the war is use the words of the Ukrainian soldiers themselves. They say, we want to fight the Russians. They send us to the front lines and we go to these trenches where we proceed to be bombarded and we lose 50–60% of our people. So they pull us out. We're all dead and wounded and we never saw a Russian. We never saw a Russian. And that's what's going on here. Ukrainians aren't able, even if they have people who are willing to close with and destroy the Russians through firepower maneuver and close assault, the Russians are not giving them the opportunity. The Russians have perfected the art of war when it comes to taking down these defensive positions, and a key element to that is artillery.
Yes.
And precision strike air delivered munitions from drones, from aircraft, from helicopters. There's a new weapon that's being introduced to the world. It's Project I think 305. It's called. It's a a TV-guided missile that's apparently launched from a specially equipped attack helicopter. And it's a missile that can be fired literally over the horizon. The helicopter doesn't have to get, remember, we don't see the Russians. So it's not like the helicopter comes in, has to have line of sight and fire. The helicopter just working on intelligence says there's something over here. They fire Project 305, and then inside they watch the TV and they fly over. They go, oh, that looks interesting. Joystick it down. Boom, precision strike. Ukrainians are dead. They never saw the Russians. They're destroying artillery this way. They're destroying tanks. They're destroying defensive positions. They're slaughtering the Ukrainians. And this is just one example. They're using, Americans have touted, we provided the Ukrainians with the M777 howitzer and the Excalibur round. Well, I'll tell you what, you give M777 and the Excalibur to Marines who are operating as part of a Marine task force with all of that, the crude air support, intelligence, etc. Marines are going to do some damage. They're going to do some real damage. You give it to the Ukrainians, and they're going to be struggling. It's a level of technology above and beyond what you're normally accustomed to. But you know who else has, laser guided artillery shells? The Russians, and they're using them to great effect to take out, the M777. There's they call it an artillery duel, but it's not really an artillery duel. It's as if Ukrainians have the old flintlock pistol, which may not fire when they pull the trigger, and the Russians are coming at you with an AK-47. That's not a duel. That's suicide for anybody participating in that. It doesn't mean that the Russians aren't suffering casualties. They are. War is war. War is hell. And the Ukrainians have some very capable troops. Some of these troops are very well led, motivated, and very well equipped, again, thanks to NATO. And they're being provided with top-notch intelligence real time from the United States and NATO through secure data links. And so when they put all of this together and the Russians either make a mistake or, nothing's perfect. You can try your best and still there can be a gap in your coverage. The Ukrainians are able to, on occasion, put fire down on Russian targets, and they kill command posts, they kill troop concentrations, they destroy logistics, and it causes the Russians a headache. War is a constant headache. Anybody who's been involved with it knows. No plan survives initial contact with the enemy. The enemy always gets a vote, and the vote is always against you. That's just the way it works. Even during Desert Storm, where the United States won hands down, it wasn't perfect, nor was it pretty all the time. The Iraqis, on occasion, were able to land some blows. They were able to embarrass us, counter Scud campaign. We flew, well over 2,000 sorties, and we never killed a single Scud. How did that happen? We had all the superiority in the world. Well, the Iraqis were pretty good. During the attack on Kuwait City, the Iraqis nearly overran, I think, the division headquarters of the 2nd Marine Division. How the heck did that happen? Well, we made mistakes. They're pretty good, and things happen. This is happening with the Ukrainians as well. They're pretty good. The Russians make mistakes, and they pay the price. But it's not a game changer. It's not changing the inevitability of the outcome. It's raising the cost of war to the Russians incrementally. But the Russians right now are inflicting casualty ratios on the Ukrainians that are approaching 20-1, and in some cases are much higher. There's literally a situation now where the Russians can, without exaggeration, eviscerate a Ukrainian brigade without a single loss of life on the Russian side. Yes. Because, as I said, the Ukrainian soldiers are saying, we're dying and we're never seeing a Russian. Now, sometimes the Russians have to go in and dig them out of dug-in positions. And the Russians and their Chechen allies and the Donetsk People's Militia and the Donetsk People's Militia take casualties. And let there be no doubt, a lot of Russians have died. I think a good estimate would be about 15,000 deaths spread out among the Russians, the Donetsk and Lugansk militias. That's a lot of dead. It's a lot of dead. And I would say that it's not unrealistic to say 30, 40,000 wounded. So, we're talking 55,000 Russian casualties. Most of those casualties were taken early on in the conflict when the Russians, made some very serious mistakes. The Ukrainians, though, released, their Ministry of Defense had leaked a paper. They straight up admit that their army alone has suffered 191,000 casualties.
Yes.
And when you add in the border guards and others, it's closer to 250,000. So, overall, the Russians, who are on the offensive, by the way, anybody who studies military math knows that, the ideal situation would be to get a 3-to-1 advantage. And the Russians are actually attacking at a 1-to-3 disadvantage on the most part. But there's still, the casualty ratio is overwhelmingly on the side of Russia. And again, most of those casualties, if you take, you look at the big numbers and you're like, well, okay, but that's still a lot of Russian casualties against a whole bunch of Ukrainian casualties. But hey, that ain't 20-to-1, Ritter. When I put that math in, that's, you're talking 50,000 to 250,000, that's 5-to-1. Okay. And that's not 20-to-1. You're exaggerating. I said lately the ratio is 20-to-1. And that's the problem. If you look at if I graphed out Ukrainian casualties, I think at the beginning of the war, you'd see on a graph a lower number per day, then it's just going to move, the graph would be moving straight up. Whereas the Russian casualties were a higher number, not as high as Ukrainians. The Ukrainians never killed more Russians than Russians killed Ukrainians.
Right.
The Russians always had lower casualty rates, but you take a look at it and you're going to see it ramp down. So now if you isolate, because while the whole picture is important, when you're trying to project what's going to happen next week, you don't want to look back to May. No. You don't want to look back to April. You want to look at July, August. And when you isolate that part of the graph, you see the Russians nearly flatlining down here, meaning not many casualties at all. And you see the Ukrainians spiking. Right. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. So desperation. So what do the Ukrainians do? First of all, we need to understand that Ukraine is not a functioning nation state right now. What I mean by that is that they don't have an economy that's generating revenue streams for the government to fund not only the war, but to fund day-to-day business of government. Right. The Ukrainians can only survive because of the largesse provided to them by the United States, Europe, NATO, et cetera, in the form of tens of billions of dollars. The Ukrainians at one point in time were saying they needed $5 to $7 billion. I forget if it was a week or a month to survive per day. That's ridiculous. But and so they want the U.S. taxpayer to fund that. But now that number's gone up. I mean, it's some of they go, oh no, we don't need that. We need this. And I forget what it was close to like 20 billion. And that's just absurd. I mean, the United States is apparently willing to pay billions of dollars to underwrite Ukrainian debt, to pay Ukrainian civil servants, but not a penny to student loan debt here in America. Again, I'm not weighing in on the side. I'm just saying that's a very important issue to a lot of people in the United States. And it has real economic consequences. I mean, we have an entire generation whose future is shackled by the burden of student debt. Whether they should have accrued that debt is a whole different debate. But if you want to liberate the American economy, you have to liberate this generation from this debt. And Biden, remember, he's the guy that didn't allow student debt to be rolled into bankruptcies. So it's permanent student debt. Biden, isn't doing anything, but man, he's just throwing money after the Ukrainians. And I don't want to even go down the rabbit hole of throwing money after Nazis, after the Banderas, after murderers of Jews, after alleged, super race that views Poles and Russians as, genetically inferior beings. This is who we're supporting. Here in New York, there's a lot of controversy right now because, that people are saying that New York, Chuck Schumer, in fact, a Jewish American, he's the Senate Majority Leader. He's decrying the fact, rightfully so, that there's a rise in anti-Semitism and a rise in, anti-Semitic and racial hate crimes. And New York had passed a law a while ago that mandated the teaching of the Holocaust in New York schools. And they're saying, well, you're not doing your job right. You're not teaching them right. Well, hey, Chuck, what the hell kind of signal are you sending when you send billions of dollars to the Bandera movement that slaughtered the Jews during the Holocaust? I mean, if you want to teach a teaching moment right now, Chuck, Why don't you just say we're not sending money to them because they worship a guy named Stepan Bandera, who is the trigger man for 30 to 40,000 Jews killed at Babi Yar. They are the trigger man for 120,000 Poles, for 250,000 Russians. This isn't in combat. These are cowardly Banderas terrorists surrounding a village, pulling the men, women, and children out and slaughtering them. There is a statue in Poland that shows kids tied to a pole, dead kids with barbed wire. That statue is taken from a photo of what the Banderas terrorists did to Polish children, and we're giving them money. I mean, I think you're allowed to get upset about this.
Of course.
So the hypocrisy of Chuck Schumer is just mind-bending. But no, we're going to throw money and money and money, and we're not even going to go down the other rabbit hole about Chuck Schumer by authorizing $40 billion to be released to the Ukrainians to pay the salaries of their civil servants, including civil servants who are working for something called the Center for Disinformation, which has published a list of 72 people on which are several Americans, myself included, who are called Russian propagandists, information terrorists who should be arrested and tried for war crimes.
I hope I'm on that list too, Scott.
Well, maybe you can get there someday. Maybe after this podcast, I'll write them a letter. I'll say, hey,
please
Bennett wants on too.
Be on that list.
Hey, let's make this list big. Let's go big on this one. But but the last time I checked the Constitution, the First Amendment prohibits Congress from passing laws or legislation that abridges Americans' freedom of speech.
That's right.
Now, people say, well, wait a minute, Chuck didn't pass a law. Sure, he did. See, he's funding the Ukrainians to create this center. It's an American-created center, by the way. There's a congressionally funded non-governmental organization that is organizing this whole thing. And the meeting in which they announced the release of the list was attended by representatives of the United States State Department. Yeah. So this has clearly been given the green light by the United States. Yes. It's clearly an end around the Constitution to create overseas that which could never happen here, but the impact is the same. You know this and I know this. If you label somebody in America in this current environment a Russian propagandist, it has a chilling effect on their ability to do work. I have been rejected by publishers who otherwise would have published my work because they say, well, no, you write for RT, you're a Russian propagandist. And I said, well, wait a minute, I'm writing the exact same thing for them that you used to publish. You publish stuff that was worse. Sometimes the Russians won't let me put down the harshest criticism because they say, well, we're a little nervous about going there. But the outlets that I used to publish, the American Conservative published my work all the time. Fact is, the moment they released me from their stable of writers, our article I had written on Iran had been their top article for the year. So I was their number one writer in terms of attracting clicks and readership, etc. But they released me because I was a Russian propagandist. So don't tell me there's no impact on that. And then we come to the other thing, information terrorist.
Yes.
This is released at the same time. Old Biden gets out in front of the American people and brags about killing a 71-year-old has-been called Ayman Zawahiri. Now, again, good job, guys. Way to kill the old man.
Allegedly.
I mean, good, you killed him. But you killed him because you called him a terrorist. All right. And now you're letting the U.S. government facilitate the Ukrainians calling me a terrorist.
Yes.
So what should happen to me, Biden? Are you telling Ukrainians that there's a target on my back? They're allowed to Insu knife me if they want to? They said that I'm a war criminal that must be arrested and prosecuted for war crimes. But what are the crimes that I've committed? Fortunately, the Ukrainians tell us exactly what they are. Number one, I dared to say that Ukraine was a base for NATO.
And it is.
Well, man, I mean, the sources I used were actually public information releases from the U.S. Army from a permanent training facility set up by the Army in Western Ukraine, where they bragged about every 55 days training a Ukrainian battalion for the purpose of going eastward to kill Russia. Yeah, we did that from 2015, 2022. That seems to me to be a NATO base.
And the big American guy walking around with his cavalry hat with the old 1850 cavalry hat. I can't remember his name. You're exactly right. all U.S. Officers and soldiers and stuff training these guys. It was a NATO base, and
It was a 100% NATO base. So, I mean, gosh, if that makes me a Russian propagandist for being accurate on that one, sign me up. I was also accused of propagating the Bucha myth. You know, the myth being, of course, that Ukraine did it. But again, I've written extensively on this, and my sources are unimpeachable. The fact-based data that I use for my analysis, that underpins my analysis, points only in one direction: Ukraine. People who say, no, the Russians did it, provide absolutely zero fact-based data to back it up. All they say is Russia bad, Russia kill. I mean, that's it. That's all they got. So again, I'm willing to debate any Ukrainian, anytime, anywhere. Hell, take me to Kiev.
Yes.
I will do it in Kiev. I will debate you live on TV about what happened there. And then I'll walk you through and prove to you that your guys murdered it. Now, I may never leave Kiev because they'll be pretty pissed off at me, but I am so confident. I am so confident that I would win that debate. I'll do it anytime, any place. So again, if telling the truth about Bucha makes me a Russian propagandist, sign me up. And the last crime that I have committed was daring to say that the conflict between Ukraine and Russia is a proxy conflict between the United States and Russia. Wow. I mean, didn't our own Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, in May, after going to Ukraine, speaking to the press, say that the goal and objective of the United States is to arm the Ukrainians so that they can inflict pain on the Russians, to make the cost of the Russian incursion so high that Russia would never want to do this again? That is literally the definition of a proxy conflict. So again, if being 100% accurate and honest and balanced in my assessment makes me a Russian propagandist, sign me up. But now we come back. The Ukrainians are desperate.
Let me say one thing on that. I just, as an augmentation of that, I've done a lot of Russian interviews and press TV and all sorts of stuff. And I had this one Russian interview lady say, you know, why is your position so close to Russia? What is it? And I said, you know, there is an awakening that is occurring in America. There's a transformation, and men of honor, men of truth are inevitably rising up and having to speak the truth and harmonize with the truth. You can't be on the side of lies or liars or corruption. It's just, I mean, evil, and it goes against so many different grains of how we were raised, our oath as officers. And this whole metamorphosis in America, I shudder and I tremble and I am disgusted and nauseated by what I see the United States degenerating into governmentally, socially, educationally, on so many different levels simultaneously, and militarily on this wild adventurism juggernaut and proxy war with a country that single-handedly could knock the living crap out of us. And this addiction to lies and propaganda. I mean, it's almost like you're just smelling and feeling the toxicity filling the air. So it's a natural inclination for us to speak the truth. And the only platforms and the only audience that has a desire and a breath for the truth are non-American or Russian or others. And I mean, I've enjoyed the documentaries that we've been on. You and I were on one in particular, the Biolab Chemical Labs Death Factories Part 2. But it amazes me that we are in this twilight zone transformative moment in America. And I don't know if we are going, I don't know if we're going to be able to peacefully reset and reorient ourselves towards, okay, let's be about truth. Let's be about calm and harmony and peace and stability and constructive living. Or if we're going to have a revolution in this country, a violent one, to overthrow these tyrants that are doing things like this to you, the State Department, CIA, military, a presidential administration, the FBI, the Department of Justice, all trying to ratchet us into a police state of fear and then distraction into these foreign wars, and I think they're going to trigger some major false flag events in this country to create the smoke screen for more operations. But this country seems to be on the precipice where the ice is about to give, and we're all going to go through, and it's a matter of who's going to come back up. But I don't want to digress too far. I just wanted to say it is an awakening that is occurring in America that leads people to speak truth and publish like you do on other platforms, because the American platforms are so corrupt and are so fanatically and hysterically and pathologically, from a psyop point of view, they are inveterate pathological liars. That's why they smile and laugh and just they can't handle the truth. And that tells us something. When we are a nation of government manned by pathological liars, I don't know how long we're going to have. But I'll hand it back to you, Scott. You were talking about the second part. Go ahead.
No, I mean, just to follow up on that, this is an experiment that I've been wanting to do for some time. And, if I ever stumble upon $1 million, I'll do it. But I'll go out and I will recruit impartial fact checkers. Not people who agree with me, just impartial people who have a reputation for assiduous adherence to the facts. What I'll do is I'll go back to the old New Yorker, not the new New Yorker, not the one that David Rimnick has assembled to ruin truth, but the old New Yorker, back when Cy Hirsch worked for them, the fact checkers who worked there. I'll assemble them, people whose sole job is to get it right, make sure you got it right. I'll hire them, and then what I'll do is I'll go out and get all of the articles published under CNN.com. on certain, we'll pick 5 topics: Afghanistan, Iran's nuclear program, Ukraine. We can pick them. And I'll get all of the articles published on RT.com about the same things. And then I will hand them over to the fact checkers, and I will say, blind test, we'll just remove where it came from. Blind test, fact check each article, and I want you to lay it down on a scale where 1 is an absolute bald-faced lie, 10 is the absolute truth. Let's lay it down. And I will put all my money in my house on the fact that the RT will overwhelmingly be on the 5+ side of the equation, and CNN will be overwhelmingly on the -5 part of the equation. Now, there will be some RT stuff sprinkled in here. Nobody gets it perfect. There'll be some CNN stuff over here. But when you weigh it out, the Russians tell the truth far more consistently than CNN.com and Russia's propagandists. No, that's an experiment I'll do anytime. Hey, CNN, if you're watching, take me on.
Man.
Take me on. If you have confidence in your reporting, you think, no, my goodness, we are assiduous with the truth, take me on, humiliate me. I'll go before every one of your talking heads and beg forgiveness. Okay, if I'm proven wrong, I'll crawl into Wolf Blitzer's thing and I'll bow before him and say, you are the king of truth. I'll never have to do that because I am so confident. Want to know why? Because I wrote a lot of those RT articles. I know what went into those articles. And I know that I told the truth. I know that I was fact-based. And I know that the RT editorial staff held my feet to the fire for the same thing. They don't let you go spinning off into the opinion world. If your opinions are a little whack, they pull you in and say, whoa, we need some hard fact to back this thing up, buddy, before it goes on RT.com, because we have a reputation to maintain. Apparently, CNN doesn't care about its reputation. But anyways, now we come back to the present. Desperation. Right now, the Ukrainian military is in a bind. They're losing and losing decisively. They don't have enough troops. They don't have enough officers. They can't handle the equipment they're being given. And the war is about to change from a relatively static trench-type warfare to open warfare where the Russian Operation Mobility Group concept now is going to come in, and they're just going to get slaughtered. It's going to be the destruction of Battle Group Center, 1944, all over again. They know this. Zelensky knows this. Zelensky also knows that he has some big problems with his Minister of Defense and the Ministry of Defense. They don't like him. They think that he is solely responsible for the death and destruction that's being dealt out because he's playing politics. He needs this Western aid. He needs this money to underwrite his ridiculous government, and he needs military aid to keep the war going. In order to do that, he has to create the perception that Ukraine can win. So he does stupid attacks. He holds on to positions longer than they should. I mean, if the there's not a military in the world that doesn't do a tactical retreat now and then.
Yeah.
Boom. Oh God, we got ourselves in a bind here. Pull back, stabilize. You lose some territory, but you save some lives. That's smart. Not Zelensky. Hold on. Next thing you know, you got thousands of dead, and the Russians took position anyways, weakening your overall position. Counterattack. We can't counterattack. We don't have enough troops. Counterattack. Well, they assemble the troops. They move forward. The Russians catch them in the open. They kill them all. End of the counterattack. The Ukraine's best reserves that they've assembled very carefully are being destroyed piecemeal because of Zelensky's need to have perception over actually waging a competent military conflict. So I feel that he's feeling the pressure, and the pressure is going to come in the form of a 75-cent solution, the price of one 9mm bullet that will be forcefully implanted in the back of his head by a Ukrainian military officer, because eventually that's the solution. So he's desperate. And so now we come to the nuclear power plant. Why are the Ukrainians doing this? Why? I mean, we start off with just the opening premise. Russia, according to Ukraine, shelled the nuclear power plant. But Russia's occupied this nuclear power plant since March. So Russia is shelling itself. Now, most logical people would just say, okay, we're not talking about this anymore because this is just stupid. But the fact is, somebody shelled the nuclear power plant. That somebody is, again, let's just be unbiased. Let's go to the rocket, because a lot of these rockets didn't explode. They're sticking in the ground. They're sticking in the ground at an angle.
Yes.
Gosh, my old artillery days, we put a pole in the ground in the center, and then we take it down to the point, point back, and that says that's where it came from. Every one of those things will point back to the Ukrainians, but it's not just old Marine Corps stick and string tricks that are going to prove this. Let me put it this way. The United States is blanketing this area with intelligence. We have overhead collection, we have radar collection, we have SIGINT collection, we have it all. We know exactly what happened. We know when they fired, what they fired, and how many went where, because we own all of the data. Now, had the Russians fired, I can guarantee you we'd be seeing it on TV right now, CNN. Exclusive satellite photographs showing Russian artillery firing. Here's the radar track that shows the artillery firing, impacting on here. Russia attacked Russia. Oh my God. If they had that evidence, they don't. But the evidence they do have proves that the Ukrainians did it. But why aren't they releasing it? One, it's not just that they don't want to embarrass Ukraine. Ukraine was following American instructions. This entire nuclear crisis was brought up by Anthony Blinken on August 1st at the United Nations. He's the one that created a crisis. He's the one that started the lies. Russia is using this nuclear power plant as a nuclear shield. They're putting their artillery pieces there, and they're firing against Ukrainians, knowing that the brave, honorable, God-fearing, law-abiding Ukrainians would never dare fire on a nuclear power plant, because that could trigger a Chernobyl-like disaster. And Ukrainians would never want to do that because they're good people, not these evil Russians. Okay, Tony, thank you. Where's the photograph that shows the Russian artillery dug into the place? You're making a statement, Tony. That means you've seen some intelligence. Release the intelligence. Don't tell me it's too sensitive. We released U-2 pictures of Soviet missiles in Cuba. We released a SIGINT hit that showed the Russians shooting down KAL-007. So don't tell me it's too sensitive, Tony. You've been releasing declassified information throughout this conflict. Oh, yeah, that's right. You released lies. And you knew they were lies, but you released them to shape perception. So that's what's going on here. You're lying to shape perception. You created a scenario that had the Russians, through their own actions, placing this nuclear power plant at risk. Then the Ukrainians, with your permission, fired on the reactor, and immediately everybody said, Russia attacked Russia. And what kills me is the Western media is going, yeah, that makes sense. That really makes sense. The Russians would attack themselves to create a Chernobyl. Yeah, that really makes sense. It makes no sense. And here's the other thing. Everybody keeps talking about a Chernobyl. Those power plants can take a direct hit from just about anything. They're designed to, if a civilian airliner flies into them. So a Ukrainian rocket hitting the thing, it's not ideal. Nobody wants that, but it ain't going to create a Chernobyl. The big danger comes if you cut off the power.
Right.
If you cut off the power or you destroy the safety systems, then you could have an uncontrolled situation like Chernobyl that could lead to an explosion. There are backups and all that. And also keep in mind that even though there's Ukrainian engineers operating this plant, Russia has brought in their experts, guys who actually designed and built the damn reactors, who are overseeing the whole thing to make sure it's safe operation, continuous operation. So there's not really a chance of a Chernobyl, but you never know. I mean, why play? You know, I can flick a match at an ammunition depot all day. They'll say, the safety systems will never allow that to flick a match, a mistake's made, flick a match, boom! That could never have happened. It just happened.
Yes.
Why? Because I was flicking a match.
Yes.
Don't flick the match at the ammunition dump. Don't fire rockets at the nuclear power plant. It's sort of common sense. But they had to create a scenario that could seize world attention. And that's what they've done. They now have the Secretary of General of the United Nations involved. They have the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency involved. Of course, they have every diplomat in the world that's aligned with the United States involved. And they're all saying the same thing, which is what the Ukrainians want. The power plant must be turned over to an international force. And the Ukrainians are saying, yeah. And then the next thing that happened is we take over the power plant. So this, in effect, is giving the Ukrainians a counterattack. The thing they can't do militarily, they're seeking to accomplish through this ridiculous scheme. Now, Russia's not playing this game. Russia will never play this game. And I do believe, Russia's elevated this to the Security Council level. Russia's going to win because facts are on Russia's side. They'll be able to demonstrate. Russia wants IAEA inspectors to go to the site. He does not want that. Why wouldn't Ukraine want them to go to the site? Well, because they'll see the truth.
That's right.
And the report they will publish will undermine everything the Ukrainians are saying. The site is being operated responsibly, is being operated safely. There's no inherent danger by having the Russians there. That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear that, oh my God, the Russians are attacking themselves. They're committing suicide and they want to take the world down with them.
Yes. Well, that's the reality. Scott, stay with us. We're going to go to a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Scott Bennett, host of American Media Periscope's Great Awakening, and I wanted to say thank you, our fellow soldiers in the Great American Patriot Army, for standing with us and supporting us. And I wanted to take this time to remind us all that we must always be advocates of truth, virtue, love, and never advocate for violence or profanity that is below our character. And we must always shine our light before men that they see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. In our days today, when all of society is falling and crumbling in so many different ways, we need to be the lights that men seek out, and we need to be the voices of reason and peace and love. In this time where the leftists, the rhinos, and the globalists are desperate for chaos, and the FBI informants and the CIA are desperate to trigger a branding of patriots as domestic terrorists, we must never give them that opportunity by being profane or rough or in any way violent. We must choose the way of elevation and sophistication. So we will always endeavor to speak with truth, eloquence, and we will never bow down to lies or liars, but we will always conduct ourselves with the highest levels of character and always raise our lights so that men may see them. So thank you for your support, and we will see you on this field of battle in the information war. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Great Awakenings. I'm Scott Bennett. We are continuing with the great Scott Ritter, talking about Ukraine, talking about the inevitable destruction of the Ukrainian forces as a result of the superior strategic and technical and tactical operations of the Russian army, a true professional army, not a politically correct social experiment of soldiers with two moms or two dads, as it seems to be the United States is pushing our armed forces into becoming. And I don't think anyone's better than Scott Ritter, because he trained in the 80s in the Marine Corps for operations against Russia, and has said many times, we are a shadow of what we were in the 1980s. And I agree with that completely. In fact, I agree with everything that Scott's written and discussed, because it's right on. It's at the center of the truth. And what we were discussing before the break was, Scott, the nuclear power plant facility and how the Ukrainians are targeting this I mean, very recklessly and dangerously to create something that Europe would suffer from. And I mean, if that went off, I think every European nation would gut from belly to neck their leaders. Schultz, Macron, Boris Johnson's already been kicked out, but Trudeau, all of it. Well, not Trudeau. He's Canada, even though he should be gone. But Europe would fall into a major, I mean, heart attack. And all of the other variable nobody takes consideration of is all of the Africans and the Middle Eastern refugees that have flooded up into Europe and that are taking welfare and just existing there. And many of them can't speak English. There's a lot of social disturbances that have happened. If there are major upheavals in Europe, whether they lose all their oil, lose their heating, lose their everything that Russia provided, fall into this third world living condition, then the third world people, I think, are going to rise up and cause a major dark age in all of Europe. So I wanted to get your flash forward views on how Europe is going to be affected by this, and then I wanted to draw your attention to some other revelations. Go ahead.
I mean, there was a saying that came out, 100 years ago, that every society is 9 missed meals away from total chaos, and that's the truth. And Europe is about to become, as a continent, a place where there's going to be lots of 9 missed meals. This is going to be a very difficult winter. Germany in particular is going to be hard hit. Schultz, as the prime minister, the chancellor, has no clue what's about to happen to him. Some German politicians do. They're talking about violence, political violence, riots in the street, crowds out of control. But that's what happens when a society breaks down. And a society tends to break down when they lose access to energy, especially the energy that powers their industries, the energy that provides warmth to their people, the energy that is literally the fuel of their social and economic engine. Germany, their political leadership has made a political decision to try and punish Russia. But the only people being punished is the Germans, the French, the rest of Europe. Russia's not being punished. It's an inconvenience to Russia. But I think Russians are willing to tighten their belt and take this inconvenience while they chuckle at the TV screen and say, that's what you wanted to do to us. I mean, because keep in mind, when we talk about sanctioning Russia, we're not talking about, something that solely hurts the oligarchs and the autocrats and the power elite. What we imposed was a frontal assault on the Russian people.
Yes.
What we sought to do was to starve them, to freeze them, to deny them the basic comforts of life, to make life so miserable for them that they would rise up and take down Vladimir Putin and his government. So,
and we weren't going to show mercy to them. We were going to kill them so that we could return to finish up what we started in the 1990s, which was the cannibalization and the dismemberment of Russia and the acquisition of its natural resources.
Right. So why would Russians have any sympathy for Europe when because of European action, the boomerang has come home and hit Europe harder than it hit Russia? I mean, the truth is Russian people are very sympathetic people, empathetic people, and of course their hearts will go out to innocent civilians who are suffering. But it's, I don't think you're going to see the Russian government bending over its back to help any politician who helps set this up. If the Germans are able to collapse the Schultz government and replace him with somebody who is more realistic, more responsible, Russia may work with them to get out of this crisis. But that's getting too far ahead.
I think let me just end this and transition to the next subject. I think the magnanimity of Russia and Putin has an opportunity to really win the hearts and minds of all Europeans if they played this right in a magnanimous way, where Lavrov is good at this too. All the Russians are, where they present themselves and speak in a certain way. I could see a third, if not half, of the European populations completely either moving to Russia or in their hearts and minds siding with Russia, saying, you know what, they were right all along. And everything that the West and the United States in particular has been dead wrong. And, you know, we're Europeans. We're not American puppets or slaves to this globalist new world order stuff. So it could be the hardship and suffering that Europeans are going to be suffering might be enough to wake them up. And I could easily see Russia, by the weight of the people coming to them for heating oil and food, and hopefully a revelation of truth, and the vomiting out of this bigotry, this anti-Russia phobia bigotry that has absolutely no grounding in anything. I mean, it is racism and it is perverse, and there's a religious anti-Christian Orthodox versus the Catholic. There's a sick, toxic jealousy and envy. You could way back for 500 years, but I think that's dead on arrival because people are not going to have food or heating oil, like you said. Let me draw your attention to something too. I'm going to share a screen share here, Scott. Okay, do you see this? You see this slide?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what the Russians have been presenting on their Ministry of Defense. They've done a lot of interviews on it and stuff like that, and I think it's going to build. But here are the blood samples from the Ukrainian POWs. I wonder if those are the same POWs that were killed, that were murdered in the POW facility by their own Ukrainian troops shooting HIMARS rockets at them so they could stop these POWs from testifying or giving blood and these other things. But we found out that all of these drugs have been put into these Ukrainian guys. And it certainly makes sense, because the other thing we've been seeing are these Ukrainians covered in the tattoos of Hitler and swastikas and really acting like guerrillas. They have been torturing with, an obscene, monstrous, demonic nature. They've been torturing these Eastern Ukrainians in very sick and sadistic ways. And we've seen it with the similar Captagon drugs that were used in the mercenary Saudis and Qataris that went up into Syria. We see the same strategy here. And like you said, the U.S. owns the battle space when it comes to NSA and geospatial information. So the U.S. has signed off on the HIMARS being used to murder these POWs that were in the Ukrainian facility. I wonder why. And let me go to another slide here. Here's part of the reason why I think, and this was a big revelation that's still coming out about the U.S. coordination of biological laboratories and research institutes in Ukraine. And look at here. Here's all the U.S. agencies. Here's all the big sponsors: the Clinton Foundation, the George Soros Foundation, the George Soros Open Society Foundation. You got Metabiota. You also have up here on the right, you've got all the Pfizer, Merck, Moderna, pharmaceutical companies that generated this vaccine that's been killing people right and left. And here are the beneficiaries. Biden, of course, and Hillary Clinton, Obama, George Soros. They've been doing this since 2005. And here is the big one that just came out, that the origin of the new coronavirus pathogen. So Russia seems to be providing the evidence that directly links the biological chemical research done in Ukraine with these factories to COVID-19, which went to Fort Detrick and then went to Wuhan. And it's you know, there's a narrative being developed that the United States has developed this COVID-19 pathogen that was used as an excuse to shut down all society and try and transform us into a brave new world. And they go into Event 201 and Bill and Melinda Gates and a variety of other things. I wanted to get your opinion on that, Scott, because it seems to be that is a major piece of information, a major indictment, a major war crime, a major biological chemical genocide action, that if it rises to the surface and is presented in a very Scott Ritter factual, here's the facts, here's the documents, here's who's done what, that the world is going to go, the United States has been behind this, and the United States is behind this reckless war for this reason, perhaps, covering it up. It just seems like that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. But I want to get your opinion on these revelations by the Ministry of Defense regarding the biochemical labs and COVID-19. Go ahead, sir.
Well, look, I've been following the issue just like you have, probably not with the same level of detail that you have. We're in a we're in a difficult situation, as you know, where because we've been labeled Russian propagandists, if we take at face value what the Russians have been providing, even in terms of documents, et cetera, and run with it, we're going to get zero traction here in the United States. So this is an issue that's going to require absolute patience. It's not going away. And there's every reason to believe that let's take Russian conjecture out of it, because the Russians are just as capable of engaging in information warfare as we are.
Sure.
And so, they can take a fact and they can breathe life into it and turn it into something that maybe isn't really what's going on. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm saying that's a possibility. It can't be precluded.
Right.
But the basic facts aren't going anywhere. We know there were biolabs there. We know that there were documents. What really needs to happen is these Russian documents have to be corroborated. Let's take Russian assessment out of it. Let's just eliminate Russian assessment whatsoever. I don't want to hear a word in terms of an analyst. I don't care what the Russians think.
Copy.
I don't want any Russian thought in this.
Yeah.
Give me the documents.
Yeah.
And then I and others could reverse engineer it through the congressional funding process, meaning that each one of these documents is linked to a program that has a contract number. That contract number is linked to another program where a RFP was written that went to an office to get funding. That funding is linked to congressional authorization. And you do that, and these documents will show up. It will take Freedom of Information Act, things of that nature. But you can reverse engineer these documents and determine whether or not they are what they are. I have no reason to doubt that the Russians have these documents, that they've seized these documents from the relevant facilities, but you just can't run with that. Not on something of this serious.
Right.
It's this serious. The best way, let's say the Russians are onto something and that truth is on their side. The best way to destroy that is to act precipitously, irresponsibly, sloppily, because all you have to do is make one mistake.
That's right.
Then the CNNs, the MSNBCs will jump on that one mistake to take apart the entire case.
Yes.
So this is something that has to be done, very carefully. Like most major issues, it takes time. Mm-hmm. Any prosecutor, honest prosecutor, will tell you to put together a legitimate case usually takes a lot of time, a lot of investigation, a lot of data collection, and that you don't want to rush the prosecution, because the truth isn't about scoring political points. If it was, then run with it. I mean, this puts America in a bad light. Run with it and all that stuff. And you can score cheap political points by, getting it broadcast out there and things like that. But if you make one mistake,
yes,
they'll come at you and they'll tailor the whole thing down. That was, I have experience in this in Iraqi WMD. And fortunately, I never made a mistake. So they could never take me down factually. But you had to be very careful on what you said. I had to be very careful on what I said, because there would be a temptation to take it this way or that way. And you had to rein everything back in and go, this is what's going on. So I think this is an important issue. It's a very important issue, and I don't want to minimize it, but it's so important that it has to be done right.
Yeah.
And the best way to do it right is to squeeze out all Russian, wipe it clean of all Russian fingerprints, and find a way to independently corroborate these documents so that an analysis free of Russian prejudice, and prejudice isn't a bad thing. The Russians have every right to be prejudiced here. Hell, this was taking place, and if this is true, they're targeting the Russians.
Yes.
Damn right they're prejudiced. They're not happy about this.
Yeah.
But, in this case, the truth is the truth is the truth. And the best thing to do is to corroborate the documents, do a sound analysis of the data, and then let the chips fall where they do. And I would bet that the majority of the chips are going to align right with what the Russians are saying right now. But we can't just jump to that conclusion. There has to be a process that brings us there that cannot be questioned.
Yeah.
And so That's why, even though it's really cool and sexy to go forward on this one, I've taken the opposite approach, and I've gone back, and I'm not trying to secure any headlines on this one, because one mistake and then you're dead on this issue. Yeah. So I'm going slow.
I think they're doing exactly that too. You're right. You described well the mentality of the Russian, which is very methodical and slow. Let me transition to the end state of Ukraine before I want to jump into China real quick. The end state of Ukraine seems to be Russia is going to take control of all the coastal territory of Ukraine, Odessa and such. It's going to own the best real estate in Europe. I mean, it looked like the French Riviera, but without the political correctness and the African refugees. You're going to have Odessa and all these areas of Ukraine going back to Russia, and Ukraine is going to be a little island between Poland and Germany, and there's probably going to be a 38th parallel to stop this. Do you see this end state coming to be, and do you think it's going to eventually happen in the next month or two?
Well, the Russians have made it clear that that Ukraine is going to pay a price for what it's done, for the crimes it's committed. Initially, Russia would have been satisfied, I believe, with Kherson, with parts of Kherson, not all of Kherson, but you need to secure the water supply for Crimea.
Yes. Because
the Ukrainians had, of course, cut it off.
Yes.
So I think Russia had a legitimate national security interest in that. The Donbass must be liberated in totality. Lugansk has already received that 100% liberation. Donetsk just hit the 50% mark, and they're moving towards 100%, which could happen later this month or next month. There needed to be a land bridge between Crimea and Donetsk. It goes through Mariupol, so that requires some territory to be taken. But I think Russia would have been satisfied with that. But because of the resistance, and because of the horrific nature of the Ukrainian regime, which is anti-Russian to an extreme, they've passed laws which, if you took Russia out and put Jew in, match the laws passed by Nazi Germany in the 1930s.
Yeah.
It's the same mentality because they're the same people. They're Nazis. So, the Russians have pretty much come to the conclusion that if you're an ethnic Russian or you're sympathetic to Russia, you will no longer live under Ukrainian government control. Regardless of whatever the future government looks like, you will forever be part of Russia. And I think that means that they're going to take over the territories that have been historically known as Novaya Russia, Odessa, Kherson, Zaporizhia. They'll go up to Kharkov, and this will become part of Russia. I think that's that. What happens after that? I don't think there's going to be a 38th parallel. Russia will never tolerate the 30th. There's not going to be a demilitarized zone. This war ends with the unconditional surrender of Ukraine.
That's right.
And the unconditional surrender of Ukraine has, three major stipulations. Stipulation 1, you will never be part of NATO.
Yes.
Now that's going to require a little, subset called, that means you have to change your constitution. We'll get to the constitution later because it plays in a role. But the bottom line is the constitutional provision right now that mandates NATO membership must be eliminated and changed. That Ukraine will never be part of NATO.
Yeah.
End of story. 2, demilitarization. So all these billions of dollars of weapons Ukrainians received, the Ukrainian army is going to have to go on mass parade and turn all of that material over to the Russians. That's it. It ain't going back to NATO, guys. You lost it. Ukraine lost the war. Hit the parade, bring it out. We have accounting. It all belongs to Russia now. Thank you very much. But there will be demilitarization. They will demobilize. They will send these people home, and they will arrest the war criminals. All you idiot artillerymen right now who thinks it's cool to fire rounds against Donetsk or fire on the nuclear power plant, your name is on a list. You will be arrested. You will be charged, tried, and brought to justice. End of story. Either that or run like hell and see if you can make it to Poland before the Russians get.
Yeah.
Because it will be stipulated as part of this surrender that the war criminals are turned over for justice. There will be no escaping this. That's demilitarization. Denazification isn't just the destruction of all these units. And again, these guys aren't going to be given the opportunity to go on parade and surrender. They're going to be arrested or they're going to be slaughtered. That's it. There won't be any alternative for them on that. But it also will require the Constitution to be amended to make illegal the far right wing. Stepan Bandera must be outlawed in Ukraine, like Adolf Hitler has been outlawed in Germany. And the evil ideology that he has given birth to must be forever banned. There can be no political parties that are based on this. All monuments must be destroyed. Now, you can either do it the easy way, which is tell the Russians, bring over some observers, and we will have your delegation come in as we do all this ourselves, or the hard way. Russia will come in and do it for you. But I don't believe this conflict ends with those political parties around. I think whatever government that is going to emerge in a post-conflict Ukraine will be a government that will be handpicked by Russia. So there won't be a 38th parallel type situation. There won't be a demilitarized zone. There will be a defeated nation called Ukraine that will be fundamentally defeated. And you brought it on yourselves, the people of Ukraine. You empowered Zelensky. You tolerated Zelensky. You sat back in silence while the far right wing came in and seized control of your government, of your military. They imparted their ideology on you. You can say, we weren't that way. You know what? The good German excuse doesn't work anymore. We already played that game with the residents of Dachau sitting there watching the ash come down on them going, oh, I wonder what's going on. Meanwhile, the Jews and the political criminals are being burned right next door. No, there's no such thing as a good Ukrainian. You're all guilty by extension. There's no innocence here. You're 100% guilty as a nation, and you must pay a price. And that price is you're going to lose territory, you're going to lose sovereignty, and there's going to be a period of time when you're just going to be a pathetic little rump state. Now, if you cooperate with the Russians, over time, your country may rebuild. You're never going to get the territory back, though. Novaya Russia is Russian forever. You've lost that. You've foregone that right. You had it, you lost it, you abused it. You get to have some agricultural lands. There will be no more heavy industry in Ukraine. That's gone. You'll be a pathetic little agricultural nation. Okay? And I'm sorry, that's all you deserve.
Yes. At best. Let me just say
I have to emphasize, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know what the Russians are going to do. The Russian government may have 100% different approach, but I am saying that, when I listen to Denis Pushilin, the president of the Donetsk Republic, when I listen to Russian officials, when they talk about demilitarization, they pretty much said what I said. It's going to be total de-NATO. Now, all the equipment's gone. When they talk about denazification, it's not just elimination of the military units, it's the elimination of the political parties, which will require a constitutional change. And when they talk about NATO, it requires a constitutional change. So all of the elements that I described are things that come from the Russian position. Now, I fancified it up. I put in a narrative and all that. That's all me. But the basic fundamental elements do come from the Russians. And it means that Ukraine is in for some very, very dark times. But guess what? It can get darker.
Yes.
It can get darker because right now, the areas of Ukraine that will become the rump state are relatively untouched by conflict. They're not going to have to rebuild the way that the Donbass is going to have to rebuild.
Yes.
So they're lucky on that. If you live in Western Ukraine, you're relatively unscathed.
Yeah.
This can change.
Yeah.
If you want to play with the big dogs, they're going to come and they're going to piss all over your territory. Yeah. I don't mean to be too graphic. Yeah. That's what big dogs do.
Yeah.
And Russia is the biggest dog around right now. So, again, we come back to how is this going to end? I think there's some very smart people in the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense who are patriotic, who believe in Ukraine and recognize that what's befallen them is an absolute disaster. And the person to blame is Zelensky and the criminals that he surrounded himself with. And I do believe that there will be the 75-cent solution, the bullet in the back of the head, and the night of the long knives. There will be a night where all of these right-wing scum disappear. So that's what I think is going to happen in Ukraine. And I think that will then trigger the collapse of Ukrainian defense and Ukraine willing to accept a Missouri-type moment meaning the surrender that the Japanese went through at the end of World War II on the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. There will be an unconditional surrender moment, and the terms that will be dictated will be very harsh, but not harsh in terms of punishing the Ukrainian people per se, but harsh in terms of making sure that everything Russia said is going to happen is going to happen.
No, you're exactly right. And as the American liberation forces of World War II took the German prison camp and Nazi officers and showed them the Holocaust and the dead bodies, and took the civilian people and took them through the prison camps and showed them the smoldering bodies and smelled the ovens. The Americans, they forced the Germans, look at what you've done. And I think the Russians are in the right to take the photographs and the videos, and indeed perhaps the bodies and locations of all the people that the Ukrainian Nazi Bandera fanatics have tortured and in unseemly, monstrous ways, with sexual torture and things that are just more graphic than we'll discuss, but that they have done. They have done with the sanction of the US and the CIA and the British MI6. They've tortured these poor civilians with agonizing torture. All of the Ukrainians need to see these videos and these cell phone videos that the Ukrainian soldiers made. Every Ukrainian needs to see, this is what you did. Like you said, you backed Zelensky, you backed your government, you wanted to go with the US and NATO and the European Union, and this is the result. Your people did this to old people, women and children in Donetsk and Lugansk and elsewhere. Show these people the graphic horrors that the Ukrainian Nazi types have done. Now, whether Russia will do that or not.
Well, Russia's going to look. There's trials getting ready to take place where all of this is going to happen. All of the evidence that you just talked about is in possession of the Donetsk People's Republic. They've already put together I think in the orchestra hall of Mariupol, which was relatively unscathed from the conflict. They've already built the prisoner cages, and they are preparing for these trials. These trials may start this month, and a key element of the trials will be a tremendous body of data collected by the Russian intelligence service and Donetsk law enforcement in the form of these cell phone videos. All criminals that operate on this level, they have one thing in common: they record everything they do. They get some perverse pleasure out of maintaining proof. And when Russia took Mariupol, they seized a lot of data, a lot of thumb drives, a lot of video camera phones and stuff. This data will be shown to the world, together with a living, talking witness who's going to confess to everything that's on it. Now, some of them died. I mean, Ukrainians, with American help, by the way, attacked a prison facility for the purpose of silencing forever some of the most damaging witnesses from the Azov regiment. Oh, by the way, any American who was involved in that, you're a war criminal.
Yes.
So if you're part of that intelligence chain that helps the Ukrainians target HIMARS, and you knew that they were going to fire on that prison, you're a war criminal. Yeah. I'm sorry, Captain Schmuckatelli. I'm sorry, Corporal Smith. You deserve to be arrested and go to jail. And if you're a lawyer, a JAG in European Command, and you're not prosecuting these people, then you're not doing your job. That makes you complicit in your guilt. And if you're an American general or president who knew about this and green-lighted this, then you're a war criminal. I mean, Americans need to wake up to the fact that it's not just the Ukrainians committing these crimes. By us throwing our weight behind, by us providing support, we are putting what otherwise might be good, solid American citizens who are serving their country at risk, because they're getting involved in the perpetration of war crimes. And if HIMARS was used against the prison, and that could be proved, yep. We know that the Ukrainian deputy head of intelligence for the Kiev district has said that the Americans do all the HIMARS targeting. They provide the intelligence, they greenlight everything. Nothing happens with HIMARS without American control. So if HIMARS was used, that's American fingerprints. Man, we're war criminals. Yes. We're war criminals. Yes. And that's disturbing. That should disturb everyone. The Ukrainians, they'll be brought to justice. I mean, look, I'm a little bit more bloodthirsty than you, and I would hope that what would happen to Azov would be similar to what happened to the Nazis in Kiev in 1946,
Yeah,
where several hundred of them were lined up and they were all hung at the same time.
I agree.
That's what needs to happen. There needs to be no mercy to this scum. And there's a couple of reasons. One, you got to cleanse it.
Yeah.
Rabid dogs need to be shot.
Right.
This isn't a case of the neighborhood dog accidentally biting a kid and then can be retrained. A rabid dog needs to be shot. Atticus Finch knew what he was doing when he pulled the trigger on the rifle. You kill the rabid dog.
Yes.
And any Ukrainian who has tattooed his or her body with a swastika and has joined an organization that revels in the death of subhumans is a rabid dog. You cannot retrain them. There is no rehabilitation. Boom. Hey, Ukraine, be glad I'm not a Donetsk prosecutor, because if I were, man, you'd be going down. And I'm surprised more Americans aren't like this, because after all, we did go to war against this ideology. We sacrificed, hundreds of thousands of Americans in the cause of defeating this horrific ideology. And yet, there it is, supported by America today, alive and well and living in Ukraine. And it's not minority opinion. These aren't a fringe group. These guys have taken over Ukraine. The national hero of Ukraine is Stepan Bandera. The parliament voted him in. So this isn't some minority party hanging out in the fringes, getting more TV coverage than they deserve. These are people who have hijacked the nation. Yes. And the final insult to Ukraine, I don't mean to be too insulting to them, but I am. You idiots. Stepan Bandera is a Polish citizen. Yeah. So you elevated a Polish Nazi to be the Ukrainian national hero.
Yeah.
Next.
Scott Ritter, we appreciate you very much. Thank you for being with us. God bless you. We will see you next time.
Okay, thanks a lot.